Now we're looking at the final part of the lecture, and this is going to be types of breads. So we're going to look at quick breads. Quick breads utilize baking soda or baking powder or another chemical leavener to produce carbon dioxide, which causes the product to rise. The good things about quick breads is that they're quick. They're ready for baking right away. So after you mix them, say you're making muffins, biscuits, or pancakes, when you add that liquid to your dry ingredients, it actually starts the chemical reaction, especially if you're using baking powder because it's a double acting. So once that liquid hits that baking powder, it starts the chemical reaction. And then when you pop it into the oven, two things are happening. The second acting part of the double acting baking powder goes to work and it starts to produce carbon dioxide, but also all of that liquid that you used in your ingredients, the water, the butter, it starts to evaporate and it causes steam, which also causes lift, so that causes your bread to rise. So quick breads, basically what you do is you mix all your ingredients together, you pour it into a pan of some sort or onto a skillet. You stir it only until mixed. You don't want to over stir it because you don't want to develop extra gluten, and it causes your product to be tough. Some biscuits are rolled out and kneaded. To knead, what you use is the heel of your hand. You press down and you push away from your body, and then you rotate the dough. You fold the dough towards you and then knead it again. This develops gluten. Not a lot of quick breads like banana breads or waffles require this, but some things like biscuits, which is it is a quick bread because it does not use a yeast, it does require to develop a little bit of gluten. So we will be making some breads in here, so you'll get to practice using the kneading methods, and you'll get to also practice making quick breads. Yeast breads, on the other hand, these are breads that use yeast, which is a tiny fungus, and it activates in warm water. So when you take your yeast out of the package, as is, they're sleeping. It's dried, and they're not going to do much. It does not start to act until it's added to warm water, which just causes them to wake up. And if your yeast is good, you'll start to see a little bit of foam start to happen in your water as you dump the yeast in there. Now, using yeast, it takes longer because your dough must rise. However, I do have a recipe that we will make it here. It's for an hour dough, and it's really, really good. But you still got to let it rise. You got to let it double in size before you bake it. So typically we don't use a lot of yeast in here because of that extra time constraint. So it's really great that you guys learn how to use quick bread methods because it is faster. So some examples of yeast breads are going to be white bread, whole grain bread, raisin, cinnamon rolls, and even pizza crusts. These are all breads that use yeast to rise. So when we're making yeast breads, we're going to combine our ingredients. You mix the yeast first with warm water. This is what you do to cause it to wake up. Now, if you just drop the yeast in the dough or in your flour and then eventually add the water, it won't have enough time for it to activate and you won't get a good rise. So by mixing it with that water, it activates the yeast, causes carbon dioxide, which is needed to allow the dough to rise. So after you combine it, all your ingredients together, you're going to knead it for about 5 to 10 minutes. This causes the gluten to start to form, and it's kind of like beams in a house. Those gluten is going to cause the bread to become structurally sound. So once that yeast starts to burp, give off that carbon dioxide, if you don't have that gluten, what's going to happen is that it's going to be like a balloon. It's going to rise, but once you pop it in the oven, it's going to eventually deflate because it can't hold itself. So that gluten allows all those strands to give that bread structure so that it will rise and it'll keep its shape. So after it's risen, you're going to allow it to rise, punch it down, and then it's going to rise again. And then you're going to bake it, and then you tap the crust with your knuckles, and it should sound hollow because you should have all those little air pockets that that yeast and that gluten made as it rose. Now lastly, we're going to look at microwave cooking, because we do use the microwave when we are talking about breads. However, if you don't do it correctly, what's going to happen is you're going to have a dried out piece of bread. So when cooking breads, you want to make sure that you defrost or warm prepared rolls. You don't want to cook them in the microwave. You don't want to buy a frozen bread and then pop it in the microwave and just think it's going to cook. It's not. But if you want to warm up prepared rolls, you want to put them in the microwave. I like to cover them with a little damp towel to keep them moist, and for about 10-15 seconds until they're warmed through. You do not want to cook or warm them up too long, because they do become really hard and stale. Microwave is good for reheating items. You can try to bake it, but it will be very pale in color. So highly recommend not baking bread in a microwave. It just doesn't work. Microwaves also used for hot cereals, for like oatmeal or cream of wheat. We typically don't use it for rice and pasta, because if you put it in the microwave, it takes just as long as if you put it on the stovetop. So there really isn't any benefit of microwave cooking your pasta or your rice. Now, there are gadgets that have been made that allow for microwave cooking. Let's say you are in a dormitory and you don't have access to a stove. You can use those devices to microwave cook your rice. But if you have a full kitchen, it's just as easy as to put it on the stove than it is to put it in the microwave. So this concludes the overview chapter of Chapter 50. Hopefully you've got some really good information, and you have your packet in front of you so that you can go back and you can find the answers to your review questions.